Good morning. Welcome to our presentation. My name is Krzysztof Gwosdz, and I have a great pleasure to present on the behalf of the whole team our contribution, which is entitled The Digitalization of Industry in the Semi-Periphery, the Evidence from the Polish Automotive Sector. The Industry 4.0 may have a dramatic impact on the way the business is conducted and reorienting the global value chains. The key question for us is whether the adoption of Industry 4.0 will provide opportunities or rather a threat for companies and entrepreneurs located in the semi-periphery on the example of Polish automotive industry. In our presentation, we have three research goals. First, we want to shed some light on the developments of Industry 4.0 in the Polish automotive sector. Especially, we want to discuss whether this is the factor that facilitates upgrading of automotive producers located in Poland, or rather a threat. Generally speaking, that we do believe that contemporary trends in technology, business models, and the labor market situation suggest that we are approaching a turning point when Central European automotive industry may begin to lose its comparative advantage, and Industry 4.0 is one of those factors. And finally, the current situation cannot be neglected, which were triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. So in the end, we would like to debate a little bit on its effect on the mid-term and long-term future of Polish automotive industry and the adoption of Industry 4.0 solutions in particular. In this section, I would like briefly discuss the current trends and challenges of Polish automotive industry. And I would like to start with two photos. To the left, there is newest Volkswagen factory in Europe, plant in Września, nearby Poznań, which produce commercial vehicles, and this is the plant with newest technologies of Industry 4.0. So state of art at this moment. To the right, it's a factory which was the newest 22 years ago, and now it undergoes a fundamental change of its profile. And this is the factory of PSA, former General Motors in Gliwice in Silesia. Considerable growth and expansion of automotive industry in Poland in the recent 3 decades made it the second most important sector of Polish manufacturing, both in production and export, with considerable employment exceeding 200,000. We identified about 1,000 companies which are active in Poland. 700 of them acquired a must for contemporary automotive suppliers certificate IATF 16949. This development was driven mainly by massive foreign investment, and as a result, 4 out of 5 plants in automotive is foreign owned in Poland. Automotive consists substantial part of Polish export. Actually, vehicle parts and cars are pillar of Polish export, and about 80% of the production is exported. Quite impressive number of greenfield built in the recent 3 decades. The number exceeded 300. And while there is a lot of investigation of Poland or Central European automotive industry, So the literature is massive, and generally there is common agreement that the country is positioned as integrated semi-periphery, taking into account the limited decision-making of branch plant of foreign companies, limited technological competencies. While upgrading is underway, but mainly product and process. If we have a quick look at the structure of Polish export, there is a uniqueness of the country in comparison with other Central and East European countries. First, in spite of tremendous growth in passenger car production in Central and Eastern European countries, there is stagnation in Poland, while there is extensive growth of parts and accessories, which is very dynamic. I've mentioned before that in the turn of the third decade of 2000s, the country is a turning point in terms of its automotive industry. This is well illustrated by the challenges identified by surveys conducted in recent years. I refer to two surveys, Japan External Trade Organization and SDCM and for Sullivan. They clearly shows that the labor issue are the main challenges for companies, especially rapid labor cost growth. Then securing human resources or scarcity of labor, it's maybe posed as the top challenge before the COVID times. Well, the political and social situation is growing in importance, and these two together constitute the major challenges for the development of the industry in the country, according to managers. Okay, so let's move to the main topic of our presentation. And well, there is a lot of definition of Industry 4.0, and sometimes it's an umbrella term for several solutions and techniques. I personally like the Tomlinson definition or understanding of Industry 4.0 as the recent trend in automation, digitalization, and data exchange in the manufacturing technologies that include cyber physical systems, Internet of Things, cloud computing or cognitive computing. And those solutions or technologies, systems dramatically change the organization of production and affects the work environment and the number of workplaces, triggering so-called technological unemployment. Generally speaking, the Industry 4.0, as one of our interviewee remarked, a fundamental change and a challenge for the organization of the whole sector. The Industry 4.0 poses a challenge, especially in the context of semi-peripheral integrated economies like Poland, because in the epochal transition of automotive industry, using the word of Covarrubias and Ramirez Perez, the new industrial and technological paradigm, I mean in mobility, new business models, digital transformation, and while they all imply deep changes in the mechanism of catching up in the context of semi-peripheries. And according to Andreas Salavet's recent publication, actually two quite contradictory scenarios are emerging for semi-peripheries. First, pessimistic, that the faster pace of development of Industry 4.0 in core countries may trigger downgrading and substantial loss of workplaces and competences, as the fully automated and connected smart factories in the core countries simply replace the labor-intensive plants, cost-effective thanks to flexibility and cost of labor in the latter regions, or perhaps quite contrary, optimistic, that integrated peripheries through digital transformation that could enable decentralization of higher value added activities within corporate global value chains, it may trigger, hopefully, for such regions, further upgrading of the automotive industry. Well, which scenarios will realize, we would like to test in the case of Poland. As a departure point, let's have a look at the number of installed industrial robots per employees, which is an indicator more Industry 3.0 than 4.0, obviously, but well, because Industry 4.0 is another stage, so the picture is very telling. So the number of robots in Poland is far behind the world average and far behind neighboring Czechia, not mentioning Spain, Slovakia, or Germany. Of course, this is the picture for the whole industry. We have no data for automotive industry, but nevertheless, as one of the managers we had interview with aptly remarked that while many automotive companies are still from automation, half automation, as he mentioned, we are here. So actually, according to another interviewee, 70% of companies actually didn't start digitalization. He mentioned that digitalization is kind of a task and are still waiting to fulfill. This is well confirmed by our own broad research on the opinions and attitudes of managers of companies about main factors influencing their strategy in Poland in the recent 5 years. And as we can see, although automation, robotization of production is among the group of rather important factors, but far not as important as the quality requirements of certification system or situation of the labor market in Poland, while the implementation of Industry 4.0 solution was mentioned as the least important factor influencing the strategy in Poland. We decompose the results into different strata of automotive companies, and well, what can you see is that the tier 1 are more willing to introduce the IO 4.0 solutions than the lower tiers. Large and big companies are ahead of small and medium-sized, and foreign-owned are ahead of domestic owns, which is no wonder, as the domestic companies consist mainly of smaller companies and active in a lower tier of automotive supply chain. We tried to assess the stimulating factors for implementation of 4.0 solutions, and on the whole, there is one common factor. This is the shortage of labor. So this is the main factor pulling the industry 4.0 and 3.0 also in Poland. And in the case of different types of entrepreneurs, our findings show that in case of subsidiaries of foreign firms, 4 factors are important. First, 4.0 is implemented faster in companies which, or in plants which achieved so-called product mandate and had previously R&D competencies. There is a relationship between new investment and Industry 4.0, as the new factories are state of art and just ready for all these contemporary solutions. There is the policy of headquarters, especially the adoption of digital transformation strategies. And finally, what we find relevant is high local autonomy of companies, which enables the room for experimentation. In terms of domestic suppliers, what we found that those few companies that introducing I4.0 solutions are those who are strong in niche products and have enough profits to invest into new ways, and managers' attitudes, which seems crucial, and it can be interpreted in the concept of habits. Finally, for digital entrepreneurs, I mean by them providers of Industry 3.0 and 4.0 solutions, the 2 pillars for growth are first, local market for Industry 4.0, which is growing and will be growing hopefully, and second, strong software sector in the country, and companies, IT companies who were not active previously in delivering solutions for automotive industry see a growing market in this segment of the economy. So we identified several challenges and we categorized them into 4 groups: management, human and social capital, technology, and finance. And well, according to our research, one of the barriers is a low openness to cooperation, and is generally the result of weak social capital, also a lack of mutual trust between entrepreneurs, unwillingness to cooperate. So only a fraction of, for example, companies are members of automotive clusters. At this moment, there are 4 large automotive clusters in Poland, but well, in terms of the total number of companies active, they concentrate only a few percent of them. There is, also especially in smaller companies, rather poor project and process management. Another challenge is generally weak cooperation, especially small and medium enterprises with R&D and universities. And finally, the finance. The profitability of suppliers is low and still failing. So there is no money, and there is no time also for experimentation. So this is the issue for domestic companies, and the challenges for them are especially dire, as we identified. So as there are of very recent nature, it's a little too early to draw a firm conclusion about the effects of the newly implemented programs. Well, the stakeholders we interviewed were also quite careful in their opinions, stressing that public support should not be overestimated in the whole process of speeding toward Industry 4.0. While nevertheless, the managers assess the activities as valuable and mainly in the field of providing support for education and staff training. And what is considered by managers as particularly relevant and effective in terms of support is the possibility of experimenting and exploring new fields. Because without public financial support, especially domestic companies could not afford this. Well, have been some promising results among some innovative support programs aimed at accelerating cooperation between innovative startups and big companies in more major industries that have been introduced by the Polish Agency of Entrepreneurship in partnership with technological parks and special economic zones. And well, in our opinion, perhaps the major long-term positive effects of current policies may be found in networking activities among business companies, research centers, universities, and other institutions, what have been identified by one of the biggest challenge in developing of Industry 4.0. Okay, so we sent the abstract to Gerpisa conference, and well, then the main game changer came that reoriented the priorities of the industry. So in the final section, we would spend a minute or two on possible effect of COVID global pandemic on the economy. And well, in terms of supply chains, which I expected to change dramatically, there would be more regionalized, shorter. So when there will be more European oriented, this is a chance for producers located in integrated semi-periphery. But the question is whether they will be more nationally oriented. Well, e-commerce is an opportunity for light commercial vehicles, which is a segment of cars which is strongly developed in Poland, and it will be strengthened when the investment in a PSA plant in Gliwice will be completed. The main issue is labor scarcity, because this no longer is a serious barrier, unfortunately, for workers if the dark scenarios will fulfill in the autumn. So, well, there are two possible scenarios, positive and negative. In positive scenario, the trends which emerge in the recent years towards more stable working environment, more training, and if the company will want to keep the crucial workforce, this tendency should be maintained. On the other hand, there will be on tight budget, several layoffs and fluency problems in terms of growing unemployment in some regions and some places. There will be perhaps low-end solutions implemented and possible downgrading of the country, especially in terms of the growing requirement for new skills in the eve of Industry 4.0 developing. Well, on the other hand, there will be diversification of suppliers, which open a window of opportunity for perhaps for some suppliers, contrary to previous trends where the consolidation of supply chains were observed. And finally, what we observed also in the crisis of 2008 and 9, that opened a window of opportunity for some Polish suppliers for acquisition. Maybe this is also opportunity to buy attractive assets. Well, from the perspective of the main subject of our presentation, the question is about the impact on different Industry 4.0 solutions. So on the one hand, there are projections of acceleration of e-commerce, system of supply chain integration, especially digital twin models, which can test the different risk scenarios. So windows of opportunity for some digital entrepreneurs perhaps open, and maybe it can be utilized by dynamic digital entrepreneurs with domestic capital. On the other hand, the current dire problems with liquidity, especially for small and medium enterprises, pose the question of making the implementation gap even wider. Well, we try to work some scenarios taking into account the trends in the introduction of Industry 4.0 solutions. So we put two possible scenarios. So acceleration and stagnation, or slow growth, and combined with tendencies in upgrading or degrading within global value chains. And well, we have, of course, desirable scenario that in the semi-peripheries, thanks to the window of opportunity opened for some companies by COVID-19, will observe the upgrading within global value chains and the acceleration of Industry 4.0. On the other hand, we have a dark scenario that the reintegration of production within core economies, thanks to both the results of renaissance of local sourcing combined with the faster pace of Industry 4.0 implementation, will bring the downgrading, technological unemployment, and in general the shrinkage of the industry and semi-peripheries. Well, and the third scenario, which is perhaps the base scenario, that we will observe the continuation of the trends that there is marginal upgrading, especially functional, with slow introduction of Industry 4.0 solution. So coming to conclusions, we would like to stress few issues. First, that in the context of semi-integrated peripheries, implementation of Industry 4.0 can be viewed as a long-term challenge due to several barriers of managerial, human, financial nature. So it's a challenge, and it will be a rather gradual change. What we found, especially strong challenge, is the lock-in in the old routines of managers, of engineers. So mental barriers that could be or must be overcome to accelerate the pace of the digital transformation. Although, as I mentioned before, the instrument of the public support are of very recent nature, in our opinion, the major long-term positive effects may be found in networking activities among business companies, research centers, universities, and other institutions. So in terms of long-term effects, the main effect of Industry 4.0 is that it reduces labor flexibility, which is one of the pillars of current success in the industry of all Central and East European countries. So it posed a major game changer in terms of the competitive position. And of course, there is the question of the aging equipment in the Central Eastern European factories. So the rate of investment in the recent few years was moderate, I would say. The main assets were laid some years ago. So in the eve of the technological revolution, the question is whether the assets will be rebuilt in Central and East Europe, or rather will be shifted back to the core countries. So this issue, the answer to this issue is crucial in terms of future perspective of Central and Eastern Europe. On the other hand, there are some promising scenarios for at least some types of companies and for some regions, that first, technological changes related to Industry 4.0 seem to be a window of opportunity for some domestic suppliers that offer tailor-made technological and software solutions. And also, we observed an emerging scenarios for some, let's say, core regions in the country that a critical conjunction of automotive industry as a customers and IT industry as a providers of services and products and institutions that provide support for that emerge and enable the faster upgrading within value chains. Thank you a lot for your attention. I would, in the end, acknowledge this financial support of European Trade Union Institute and Polish National Science Centre that enable to fulfill this research. So thank you once more for the attention.